Welcome to the Kriya Yoga Podcast, a source of inspiration and actionable education for those inspired towards the goal of enlightenment through yogic meditation. Through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share the possibility of waking up to the reality of self and God realization, and to remind you of the immortal words of Paramahansa Yogananda. Don't look back. Don't look to the left or to the right. Look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and I'll be your host on this adventure of spiritual self-discovery. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. In this episode, we're going to feature another talk from a Kriya Yoga Alliance member, Ray Booker. Ray Booker is a student of Roy Eugene Davis. He spent 25 years learning and studying with Mr. Davis. He's also an Ayurvedic practitioner and a student of Sanskrit. This talk, he's going to be speaking on the origins of karma, and he's going to be pulling in important sutras from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And if you'd like to tune in to more talks from Kriya Yoga Alliance members, you can go to KriyaYogaAlliance.com. Just scroll down the page, and there you'll see a list of dates and Zoom links to join the Sunday service and meditation. Also, Kriya Yoga Alliance members occasionally give in-person retreats and workshops. You can find those listed on that page as well. So I hope you enjoy this talk by Ray Booker on the origins of karma.
Oh, here we are. All right. I believe that most folks are in, and the technology is working as it should. No promise that it'll continue to do so, but that's the way technology goes. I'd like to welcome you all again to the Kriya Yoga Alliance Sunday morning service. It's always wonderful to join in and to see faces. Myself, I'm coming off of a week of solitude, which is always good, but it's also always good to get together every now and again in a bit of fellowship and a bit of gathering together. I'm going to talk to you a bit this morning, morning for me, maybe afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. A bit about something that we hear a lot about, that I would say, if I may use this word, has been appropriated a bit by folks. A lot of those folks being in the Western Hemisphere. And that thing is karma. It's always a fun thing to discuss or to joke about. How many times have we heard from various sources and ourselves, such sayings as you'll reap what you sow, and, you'll get what's coming to you, and all of that sort of a thing. And, there are some other favorites like, karma's a you fill in the blank type of a thing. But it's tossed around quite a bit. So I want to touch in a bit this morning and look at it from a source, a trusted source, namely Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and do away with some of the modern appropriations and things of it and get a little more closer to the source. As we know, Patanjali wrote a very wonderful treatise on yoga. The information that he provided us there was not necessarily his own, but a gathering of truth, let's say. And in this wonderful treatise, he does speak to karma. Particularly, he introduces, I believe, the idea there in the second chapter. And in sutras, or verses, as you may say, 12 and 13, he gets to the point. And I was just reviewing this over the last couple of weeks, and it fell into my lap as something to share with you all. Of course, we could write a book about karma. We could speak for a couple of days about karma. But in this 20, 30 minutes or whatever here that I'll share with you, I'd simply wish to share Patanjali's words, some of my words, and to give you, let's say, material for contemplation, meditation, to inspire you to then go back, maybe read these words yourself, read other sources, other trusted sources. As we know, my guru, and the guru and teachers of others on this call, Roy Eugene Davis, wrote many commentaries on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So I will encourage you also to reference the beautiful book, Life Surrendered in God, and other commentaries that Roy did. He was in the process, actually, at the time of his transition, of doing yet another commentary on the sutras. But let's get back to this karma thing, this whole idea of cause and effect. You do this, you get that. Let's use Patanjali's words. In Sutra 12, he states, Klesha mula kamarsayo drishta drishta janma vedaniya. And what that says is, loosely translated, the reservoir of karmas is rooted in the Kleshas. And this brings about experiences in births, both seen and unseen. Very interesting that he's stating that kamarsayo, this word kamarsayo, the reservoir of karmas, this vehicle that holds this karma being all of our thoughts, actions, and desires, the roots, are then rooted in these kleshas. And that this brings about experiences in this birth, those that are seen, and the unseen. Of course, this alludes to and touches upon the idea of reincarnation and all that, but that in itself, like I say, is another subject. When Patanjali spoke of these kleshas that are the root of these karmas, he had mentioned them earlier. So let's back up just a bit here, and let's speak about what it is that brought us here, the Kriya Yoga. That is what we wish to and are studying, living by, etc. And in the beginning of chapter 2, prior to getting to this wonderful Sutra 12, where he defines karmas as being rooted in these kleshas, he defines Kriya Yoga. Yeah. He states that it's, of course, a course of discipline, a course of austerity, a course of study, reading the scriptures, listening to one's guru, and very importantly, surrender in God. And after he states this definition of Kriya Yoga, he states something very important. I've gone back and read it a few times, read it again this morning. He states the purpose. I mean, okay, we do this Kriya Yoga thing. Okay, why are we doing it? It helps to pass time. It's something to do. It can give us guidance in life. It can do this, it can do that. But he's very succinct in stating the purpose of Kriya Yoga once he defines it to us. So I'll share that with you. He states samadhi bhavanartha kleshatanu karanartascha. And what that states is Kriya Yoga is for the purpose of realizing samadhi, that total absorption, that which is really undefinable. So I would leave it at that, samadhi. And the other purpose that he states two purposes here. The other purpose he states is the weakening of the kleshas. So there's our kleshas that were mentioned in Sutra 12. These kleshas take on an importance because they're stated by Patanjali as one of the two purposes of this Kriya Yoga that then he espouses. Very succinct. Two purposes for Kriya Yoga. So being I won't make the mistake of diving into defining samadhi, let's look at the kleshas here briefly. We already know that he stated that they are the root of karma. The first klesha, avidya, ignorance. Thinking the impermanent to be permanent, thinking the impure to be pure, thinking that which we are not to be that which we are. Avidya. Ignorance. Then there's asmita, that I am, that I amness, that identification of the Purusha, that identification of the power of the seer with that of what is seen by the body mind, that identification. And what do you have there? My oh my. Identification, that I amness, thinking that we are something that we are not, that blending of the power of the seer with the power of that which is seen. Then he states raga. Let's call it attraction, desire. Let's call it holding on to prior happiness. How many times have we said, wow, I really wish I had that again, that holding on to prior happiness. I really wish I could do that again. I really wish I could be there again. The next is devesha, which is the opposite of this attraction. It's repulsion, the holding on to prior pain. Raga and devesha are really just, they're really just two sides of the same coin. Holding on to prior happiness, holding on to prior pain. Attraction, revulsion, repulsion. So this devesha, once again, we could easily say it in the same way. Boy, I never want to do that again, or I wish, wish that doesn't come around anymore. So it's the flip side of that holding on to happiness. It's the holding on to prior pain. And then the last klesha that he speaks to is a very strong one, abhinivesha. the will to live. Let's call it that. The will to live. And when he defines this, he says that this, by its own volition, flows even in the wise, even in the learned. It's that strong. That will to live. If any of you have ever been in a position of having your life truly at risk, I hope that has not occurred and doesn't occur to any of you, but it has occurred to some, myself included. And it's in that moment when one realizes that the giving up of this life could indeed occur, that Abhinivesha can step in and that will to live can enter. It's very, very strong, as he stated, even in the wise, even in the learned. So there we have our kleshas. One of the two purposes that Patanjali speaks of for this whole Kriya Yoga. And that he states in Sutra 12 as being the root cause of karma. Now, in Sutra 13, this is the last sutra that I will mention. Sati mule padipako chatyayur bogaha. And what that says is because we have this root, of course, it must ripen. It must ripen. And upon ripening, it bears fruit. And the fruit that is born by this ripening is life, the experience of life and death, that wheel of birth, death, that cycle called samsara. I think a lot of us have heard of that, the wheel, the cycle of, it's like life is this continuing current, this river. And as we are experiencing this, as we are dissolving karma from past lives, we are also in the process of creating karma for the future. There you are. You're on the wheel. You're in the wheel. And this current flows, and it flows, and it flows. And this is where it gets interesting. This whole karma thing. As we're working on or allowing karma to dissolve, we're in the process of creating it. Samsara, we're in this wheel. So where's the jumping off point? What do we do about this? I skipped over one statement that Patanjali made at the beginning of the second chapter, but I think it will come into play now. It's very important. What he stated was avidya kshetram uttaration. Avidya, this ignorance, is the field for all the others. Avidya is the field for all the other kleshas. This ignorance, this avidya, is what allows the others to even exist. So when we look at that, there's the root, if I may use that word again, of how we can begin to weaken, anu, begin to weaken these kleshas that are the root cause of the karma, which is the root cause of being in this wheel of samsara. and coming back again and again and again. Because, as I mentioned, we're in this flow. Let's use that analogy, I guess is the word. And we look at this as a river. Everything downstream, of course, is affected by what's upstream. So if we change what's upstream, what's downstream is going to be affected. So looking at that, that brought to mind when I was thinking of that during my week alone, it brought to mind something that occurred in 1996. I had come into contact with a gentleman from India named Rajiv, who did Jyotish, was going to read charts. So I said, oh, I've heard of this Western astrology thing, but this is kind of new. I had been with Roy for about 2 years then, and I just dated myself, didn't I? Anyway, I asked him when I saw him next. I said, Roy, I'm not familiar with Vedic astrology, this Jyotish, and I have the opportunity to have Rajiv do my chart. And I said, what do you think about this? And in Roy fashion, he very calmly looked at me and said, yes, do that. And then he said something that, how should I put this? It's like it went into my cellular memory because it comes to mind even today, almost 30 years later. He said, yes, do that, but remember, everything in the future can change. Everything in the future can change. That alludes again to this flow. What happens upstream will affect downstream. There's a gentleman, for those of you who are baseball fans, named Yogi Berra. Yogi was a member of the New York Mets, and Yogi was known for saying some really off the wall stuff. He would say stuff like, playing baseball is 70% physical and 90% mental. Just stuff that was kind of off the wall. But there's one thing that he said that made me think this Yogi Berra guy, maybe he was a yogi. He made a statement that also stuck with me. He said, tomorrow ain't what it used to be. Tomorrow ain't what it used to be. Everything in the future can change. Coming back around again, karma. Patanjali told us quite succinctly, quite exactly, that it's rooted in these kleshas. I encourage you to go read of these kleshas, look at them. One can take one klesha at a time, spend months or years or whatever working on them. But remember the one important thing, avidya kshetram uttaresham. Avidya is the field of all the others. It is what allows the others to exist. Knowing that as Kriya Yoga is, that really lays out a very clear and distinct path for us, doesn't it? We know that by dispelling this ignorance, by being discerning, by reading, by studying, by living the life that we were taught by our guru, Roy Eugene Davis, and by others. That by dispelling this ignorance, the other kleshas will then dissolve, begin to subtly go back to their source. He pratipasaba, heya shukshma. Resolved back to their subtle source. And being near the root. Okay, root comes from a seed. Once we get them back to that seed, the potential is still there. As long as the potential is still there, extraordinary circumstances can cause all these things to come back up again. But the idea is, once we get them back to this potential form, to this seed, in agriculture, there's something that's called scorching the seed. Once the seed is scorched, that potential is gone. It can no longer flower into whatever that is. So once we as yogis can weaken and turn these kleshas through dispelling this ignorance back into that seed of potential, we can then scorch the seed. And once that occurs, we can begin to become free of this wheel of karma, which allows us to become our natural selves. And with becoming our natural selves comes a happiness and a joy that's beyond description. Not only can we become our natural selves and experience that joy and that happiness that comes with it, we can experience that which is beyond that. Karma. A very interesting subject, very interesting topic to look at. But like I say, in 20, 30 minutes or whatever, very, impossible to really dive into it very deeply. But I wanted to present the words of Patanjali to you, knowing that all of this karma is rooted in these kleshas, and that we, through the practice of Kriya Yoga, can and should, because once you know, you should, dissolve it back to its subtle form, back to that seed, and then scorch that seed.